Hi, so today we have with us Twinkle Khanna, author of Mrs. Funnybones Returns, which is a sequel to Mrs. Funnybones. Hi,
Hello,
um,
how are you?
I'm fine. Okay, so you've written this book and it's funny, and but the piece I really loved out of all of them was the one on your father.
Okay.
So do you want to start with that? Talk about it. It's such a lovely piece, and
So I don't know. I think people like to put other people in binaries. Like if you're funny, then you only write funny things. And I had to really, in the beginning at least, struggle with that a little bit, especially when I wrote the book before this, which was Welcome to Paradise. I don't
yes.
know if you read that, but that had a lot to do with loss and mortality. And a lot of that also came from the fact that I'm at this point in my life where I have lost people close to me, relatives, parents, one parent, and a few friends, unfortunately. I've seen losses around me as well. So there's always that side of, I think when people say that you write funny things and they expect you to only write funny things, they're doing you a disservice because they're again looking at you as only a one-dimensional figure. And
Hmm.
I wrote what I wanted to write. I wrote it with my heart. I actually had written it for Tweak originally, a very
Okay.
long time ago.
Hmm.
And then I, at some point, pulled it off the website and just kept it for myself. And then finally, it made its way into this book.
Okay, because that's like really sensitive, and I mean, everybody knows that you're the daughter of a superstar, you're married to a superstar, your mother is also famous, and you come from this storied Bollywood like background,
Mhm.
and maybe I don't know, like you said, people don't. I mean, I think you've spoken about this before. People don't expect um, women from Bollywood to be so good with words. Why do you think that is? Such a stereotype. Why do you
It
think that is?
really is a, stereotype that should be broken. It's like saying that you don't expect someone from journalism to be pretty. Sorry, I had to throw that in.
That's
But
amazing.
we're just people. We have different interests.
Yeah.
In fact, it's quite remarkable, but both my parents were avid readers.
Okay.
And my mother tends to read books more on spiritualism, but my dad would read everything. I found a really beautiful old black and white picture of him reading. Well, I would say it was slightly a dubious novel. It was a Harold Robbins, but he was reading on the set.
Mm.
And and I think he was the reader in the family. What was that book? What was it? Fountainhead?
Fountainhead, Ayn Rand.
Ayn Rand Fountainhead was by his
Mm.
bedside for many, many years. I don't know why he wanted to read that. I think Howard's End was also something that he was reading at
Okay.
that point, E.M. Foster. And so I grew up with this, but my actual transition into becoming a reader was when I moved into my grandmother's house. And it was my uncle who had these boxes and boxes of science fiction novels. And
Mm.
that's how I entered, absolutely into the world of being this, well, person who gobbled up books, but I still am primarily a science fiction reader. That was my entry point. It was Arthur C. Clarke and um, all of that. And that's how I think it was called Rama something. And then, of course, you had Asimov and you had
Mm.
the Foundation series. So I grew up reading all of that. And that is what has kept me going all these years. Even now, I only read science fiction at night. That is it. That is my snack reading in science fiction short stories.
Okay. Okay, so then, how come like science fiction, are you thinking of writing it
No,
as well? Why not? I mean, if you're an avid reader.
because I've read so much of science fiction that every idea I have seems to be regurgitated. Because I have read so much. And I think that could possibly, because I've read every single kind of science fiction and I also read short stories, which means that I consume vast amount of ideas in that world. So every idea that I have seems a bit, I would say second hand, second place. Having said that, I did write an outline for a science fiction story. This was before the pandemic. I sent it to Chiki Sarkar. It was about a mutation within the ragi crop, and everybody gets this, sort of bacterial infection where you start losing each one of your senses starts failing, and then you eventually die. And then they're running across to Rishikesh, where there's the only cure. And this was before the pandemic, and I would have, been seen as some prescient person, but she said, it's not funny. There's no space for humor. And she canned it. So I still have that email and I have a reply, and I keep throwing it at her saying, you have done this to me. This is the idea I had. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, imagine if that had come out.
I have the email, I have proof with the date.
But then people might think you're some sort of witch also. So maybe.
They think all sorts of things about me now, which I think is actually a nice thing. I actually think that I've even written about it extensively, that witches are, at that point they used to call us witches, now they call us bitches, but it's pretty much the same thing. Just women who are opinionated and kind of sure of themselves.
Yeah. But to go back to your father reading Harold Robbins, I mean, don't knock Harold Robbins. Some of
I
his
have no
books are
clue.
actually good.
I found this black and white picture. So I didn't really see him reading that book. I saw him reading, these two other books that I told you, what I remember clearly.
Yeah.
But yeah, but this is a picture I found.
Hmm. So, I mean, I don't know, like, of course, you write well and all that, but there's also the attraction of because of your background and because of the family you come from, and because, like, it's almost like folklore, right? Our obsession with Bollywood and, so when people are reading stuff by you, they're also kind of like, do you think that they're also kind of placing you in that background and you know and there's a greater sort of interest and even in the writing a richness because of that because
I
your
think
essays I mean you know
I think in the beginning, I definitely had the advantage of a platform and of people knowing who I am when it came to writing the columns. There was a definite advantage.
hmm.
Um, but as I went along, and those books, the first book, I think now has done some, I don't know, maybe 300,000 copies have been sold, probably more. The others have also been about 100,000 each. I really don't know whether that's still, when it comes to different fiction, it still holds. I think with
Hmm.
Funnybones, there could still be that sort of refraction from my
Yeah.
background because it is about, people that they would assume, though they are semi-fictional characters, but that they could probably have that mantle on them and kind of imagine this and have more interest in this. But the other pieces of fiction, once you read them and once you start reading them, it would be very hard for them to sit and imagine this other Bollywood world when I'm
Yeah,
taking you somewhere else completely.
of course
Yeah.
even that book was set in that Kerala I can't remember the name the Kerala
Thanks. Shall I just say it's old age or what should I say? Oh, you didn't do
Obviously,
enough
I have to read
research.
a book a week. So,
I think it's better to say it's old age.
old age, old age. So, and of course, you can't read things from
But
that.
if you read a book a week, I also start feeling that I forget all the books I read. I forget the names of the books. I forget the names of the authors. I just remember how they make me feel, and then I'll remember
Yeah,
a few things. And
yeah.
and sometimes I start feeling, why am I reading if I'm going to forget all of this? I should just then sit on Instagram, and then if I forget all that, it doesn't matter.
No, you somehow like it's like osmosis, right? I mean, you kind of like,
Yes.
even if you don't know the particulars, you know the general thing, right?
I'm being facetious, but yes.
That went over my head anyway. So yeah, so like and things like and you also touched on stuff like marriage and I mean I've seen on social media how people say oh her husband is right wing and you make this joke I think twice in the book
Yeah.
and she's like left wing and I've heard people say that they're like doing a balancing act. So what do you say to things like that? I mean you've dealt with it funnily here. It's nice to be on the left on the left and that sort of thing. You know, so when you bring this up in your writing, Is it sort of
I
you?
don't care what people beyond a point think. They are, they can sit down and like you said, they may think I'm a witch, they may think I'm a bitch, they may think I'm left wing. It's up to them. Am I going to really sit and take the burden of their opinions for what? And add more weight to my own sorrows that I carry anyway? I don't think so.
Hmm.
I am who I am. In fact, I think one of the advantages of being in the spotlight for so many years, because I think I was born in it, and then since 17, I've been, on and off in front of the camera, is that you'll see a whole record of interviews that go back from the time when I was in my 20s. And if you go and see those, and if you see me now, hopefully I'm a lot more mature, but my ideas have pretty much stayed the same. The things I've said then, the things I've said now, there hasn't really been a big, you know, dichotomy between those phases of my life. So you can do
Hmm.
some research. That's what I'll tell people. Go back, dig it up. At some point, if there is any sort of veil, it would have dropped. You can't sustain it for 30 odd years.
Yeah, that's true.
Very difficult.
Yeah. So, how did you decide on what to write about for this book? Because there's a whole range of things in this one that you've touched on, right?
I think for me, what happened with Mrs. Funnybones is I wrote the first one and I didn't think I would ever do a sequel because I felt that that was good. People loved it, they laughed, they enjoyed it. And then I, went off doing different sorts of fiction. And then I went off to study. I went and I, did my master's. I did Welcome to Paradise, and that was pretty much the trajectory. And as I'm always writing something, so I had already begun a novel a little bit before Welcome to Paradise, and I was continuing. I'm doing that at this point as well. And then it felt like whenever I went on this tour of Welcome to Paradise, everybody kept talking about Funnybones and what it meant to them. And I realized it meant
Oh.
more to them than it meant to me. And sometimes it takes someone else to value something that you take for granted for you to be able to say, okay, fine, or you know what? Maybe because it comes easily to me. You don't put in as much effort into a column as you do for a newspaper column as you do into, let's say, a short story, for example, because
Yes.
again, of the transient nature of, a newspaper column. But then it made me think that, okay, maybe, it's the right time to do it. It's been 10 years, it's the 10th year anniversary. I've got enough columns over this whole decade that they're
Hmm.
lying there. And so I decided to do it. When I started arranging the pieces, I had one challenge because they were written over a decade. I had to somehow find a temporal connection. So, for
Hmm.
example, there's a column on mother-in-laws. Now, when I
Yes.
started writing, my mother-in-law was alive, and then, of course, she passed away. But I had to still glue all of those bits together into one piece and one essay. And those are the sort of challenges I faced with this, where I had to
Hmm.
really tie this up. Again, a lot of the columns had, because again they are about current affairs, I had to see that how things have changed when I'm putting them together. For example, there was the government had come up with some gold scheme many years ago, and I wrote about that, and then I wanted it back in this. Luckily for me,
Hmm.
they came up with another gold scheme. So it kind of became relevant, but otherwise I was having issues with that, so I had to do a lot of thinking about that. I was very clear that I wanted the first piece where, though it's about, sort of communication, it's also about religion because that is
Hmm.
important to me. So I had to make sure that I threw that in. And I
Hmm.
spoke about all the other things that I have to, and it's right there. And if you, it's, I always thought of the column as something that should make you laugh, it should make you think a little, and it's subversive in its manner. So it's all there between the
Hmm.
lines for you to read.
Hmm. So, talking about your mother-in-law, she comes across as somebody who's actually really smart. I mean, there's that bit of advice she gave you about not revealing that you don't know how to cook. You know, I mean, it's spot on. Like anybody could run with that, right? So, it's not the usual, the usual mother-in-law stories. So it's different. You want to talk about
Their
that?
usual mother-in-law, I'm not so sure. Again, we put them in brackets.
That's
Mother-in-law, so
true.
it has to be like this. She was,
That's true.
she actually, by the time I, I was about 35, I realized that I was a lot like her.
That comes across.
You know, maybe our education was different, but
Mm,
we were both opinionated, stubborn women who had similar moral compasses when it came to our families and it came to how we want to raise them in that
mm,
way and what our priorities were. We had different ways of doing it, but we're very similar in that nature and we grew to tremendously respect each other. And I think
mm,
that is, the fundamental building block of our relationship.
mm. And she seemed to have a sense of humor as well, of
She
course.
was very funny. I mean, she was very funny, and honestly, after she passed away, I feel a hole in the columns because I don't have her input. I actually
Mm,
terribly miss her because she used to say all these really odd things, and I had a complete bizarre perspective of the world because I would see it from her eyes as well. Very
mm,
different, and she was kind of cool in that way. So yeah,
And the other piece I really liked was the one, of course, about your dog. You know, I, I mean, like, I don't know, I have three dogs, so maybe that's why
yeah.
I really like that. When you want to talk about that, and the thing about dogs also is that they kind of take your heart, right? So,
I was working out today and I have a little dog called Mr. Jeeves. But
mm.
I bought him when I moved to London when I was doing my master's. I had to move there and I got him there. And now we moved back. But he's no longer this British dog because PG Woodhouse, there's a little, placard saying that PG Woodhouse lived in the same lane that I lived in. And I used to love
So,
PG Woodhouse. So I thought it was an appropriate name. But now that he's come here, he's become Maharashtrian. They call him Jivdu, Jibu.
Judo.
Blue and Jibu. So he's no longer this very fancy British dog. But he was working out with me, and I was just looking at him, and apparently your cortisol drops when you look at your dog. And I don't, and I think I've always had dogs, but I don't think any of my dogs have loved me so much, or actually, for that matter, any human being has loved me so much as this little Jibu. And I think it's because it's unconditional, right? They just
Mm,
love you because you exist and you are nice to them.
mm,
And I don't know a world without dogs. So when all of this was going on about putting all the dogs away and putting all the strays away, there was a part of me that was conflicted because on one hand, yes, you can't have strays with rabies biting people, which is
mm,
also an issue. On the
mm.
other hand, there had to be a more humane, way of
Yeah.
tackling this problem,
Mm,
which is often the which is often, I think, when you are left wing or liberal, this is the problem that you come with. I wish actually I was on the other side because I've noticed that people who are on the right side, they're very certain of everything. They're very certain that their
yeah.
opinion is right, that this is the way it should be. And maybe that's why people drift towards them. But when you're on the other side, you're always second guessing yourself, the circumstances, the pros and cons. And why have we shifted from dogs to, moral ambiguity? I don't know, but
No, but why? I don't understand. Of course, like, yeah, they are very sure. But how can you be so sure? Because the world is
exactly,
ever changing, right?
exactly. The world is changing, and there are so many facets to the same, sort of idea and concept and rule. And I think that is why and the world is changing and kind of following the right because we are also kind of saying, okay, maybe this is correct. And nobody wants to hear, okay, maybe this is correct. They want somebody saying this is the way to do it. Choices actually by default are not always, I guess, how would I say it? May not always be the best thing for you. It's more difficult to make a choice. When you don't have a choice, it's easier.
Oh my God. That sounds terrible, yeah.
It does, but it's true. It's true.
Mm, mm. Anyway.
Hmm.
Okay. So to get back to the book, so you put how did you choose which pieces to go into this one? You know?
Like I told you, I looked at the pieces. I thought about everything that has happened. I looked at the first book And I thought of what has changed for India in these 10 years, what has changed for me in these 10 years, what has changed for women in these 10 years. And the unfortunate conclusion I came to was that maybe, economically and financially, we've kind of made some dent, but socially, there has been no change in the social structure of our lives, very little.
Mm.
And if it is in the minor 1%. So that also is in the book, if you see that that hasn't changed. We've been going
Mm.
on about women's rights and we've been going on about equality. And to a certain degree, in a very small percentage, that has changed. But has it by and large? No, it hasn't.
Mm. Okay. Now talk about women, and also the relationship with your mother that comes out. That's like really, that's also very nice. And it's like everybody, your mother like kind of fixing your hair and
She
stuff
does.
like
She's
that.
a bit obsessed with that. Yeah.
So when you write about people who are famous, they're not famous to you, right? So but people are kind of looking at these essays and they're like, looking for nuggets about, your parents, your husband, whatever, your friends. And so how do you kind of do you think about that when you're writing,
Of
or
course.
is it you do? So how do you?
No, so beyond the point, what do they know? If you've read this book, beyond the point, what do you know? Do you know what religion my mother follows? How deeply she loves? What do I actually believe about God? What do I actually believe truly about love or marriage or being a mother? Do I like it? Do I not like it? Do I feel it's a burden? Nobody really knows. So the way the pieces are written, I show you a world and I tell you I have no judgment to this world. Now you think you're learning something about my mother, for example, but if you had to define what you have learned about her, what would you say?
I'd say that she's a lot like other mothers.
So then is that something is that something that you can go back and say, oh my God, you've revealed so much. What have you revealed that she's like other mothers?
And when you're saying, you're talking about motherhood, and, and that the reader can't say whether you enjoy being a mother. Of course, you can tell from the writing that it's not a role that I mean, I've seen horrible mothers who dislike being mothers and who have been forced into it. That doesn't come across. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, of course it doesn't. I mean, if I really hated it, that would come across. But you don't really know anything about me, then as you would know about somebody you know vaguely. It's
Hmm.
nothing. I'm not going to tell you my deepest, darkest secrets or and I'm very careful, whether it's my friends, whether it's even, let's say, we have this very, very funny, my husband has a very funny assistant, but I don't write about her, though it's hilarious, the things that she does. Because I don't want to reveal somebody in that way. And I also feel that when I write about my family, I'm not, or even about my helpers, I write in a way that I'm not punching down. I'm always
Yeah.
punching up. I'm keeping all of them equal in that manner.
Hmm.
So for me, those are balancing acts. I don't really think so much about what is somebody going to think because by now, and I've been writing in this column for over 10 years. By now,
Yes.
that balance is almost automatic.
Hmm. Hmm. So when you're writing about your helpers, that was also a very funny piece about walking into the kitchen and them not opening the door. Everybody goes, like everybody who has helpers, and of course
Yeah.
you probably have many more, but everybody deals with this sort of thing, right? And romances between
Yeah.
helpers happen, just like it
Yeah.
happens with people who are not your helpers. So but the way you dealt with it was really quite mature. you know
I'm 52. What do you want me to do? If I'm not mature
You
now.
can be 52 and be immature about these things. I mean, people throw a fit. I've heard of people like getting really pissed off, but in the piece, like you've been very like you left it to them, to the woman to
Yes,
kind of
it is
uh
up to them, right? Who am
yeah.
I to kind of interfere in this? It's up,
No,
it's
no.
No, it's not my monkey, not my circus. It's their lives, whatever they want to do. How can I dictate how they should live?
Yeah.
I can dictate how I want my work done because that's what I'm paying
Hmm.
for, but the rest of it I can't.
Hmm. But the kind of like gymnastic leap that she took to convert him into bhaiya.
But that is But that is in every Indian household. I used to see it in college as well. On
Yes.
Rose Day, they would come and they'd give you a rose. The next day, the girl has tied that guy a rakhi. So we used to see that
Yeah.
happening as well. Now, these are Indian things. That is why,
Yeah.
and Neelam Raj once told me that she feels whenever I am not in India for an extended period of time, the columns are not as fun. And I agree with her. It's
Hmm.
because this fuels these ideas. The every day in India you go and you encounter something bizarre. It
Yes.
happens on a daily basis.
Yes.
So it's a joy to have this chaos and then to be able to write about this chaos. I mean,
Yeah.
just 2 days ago there's this whole little piece about how there was some funded cancer research where they were using cow dung and they were using urine, and then they found out that there were scams even in that happening. There's some
What is
scam
fake cow dung?
cow dung. I don't know what they were doing, but so where will you get material like this?
Truly, truly. But that also remind the Rakhi thing. It reminded me of how in school even, like on Rakhi Day, a lot of boys would like just vanish. They wouldn't
Yeah,
turn up because they were scared that the girls were going to tie Rakhi on their
exactly.
wrists.
It's a big joy. Where else will you get this? What is the concept of a Rakhi brother?
Yeah.
Basically, I mean, it's like, okay, I like you, but I don't really want to have intercourse with you, so I'd rather tie this thread so we never have to do that again. It's simple.
Oh, yeah. Right. So talking about you going to goldsmiths and in your 50s, and that whole piece about how did you do it, man. I mean, I don't think it's like really brave, because being a student and being part of a student community as a mature person is really quite difficult, no?
I was 49, and I wanted to do this for a very, very long time. I used to take my son to the college counselor, because you have to do these things.
Mm.
And I would keep telling him that I really want to go and I want to go back to university. And then once he told me, he got fed up of me. And then he said, right now you have to just focus on your son and that is your duty and you have to do it. I said, "Why?" So I told him, as I'm going to write about you in the paper. This is such a misogynistic thing to say that is my duty. Having said that, he turned out to be very, very helpful when I did apply to universities. And then I would, run it by him that, okay, I've applied here. And my first rejection, I got rejected also. I applied to about 5, 6 universities and I got rejected by the first one. I think it was Brunel, if I remember correctly. I told him, I said, it's not even my first choice, but they've rejected me. What if everyone rejects me and I can't get in anyway? He's like, just chill, it'll all happen. And then I got accepted in 2, 3 places. Goldsmiths was my first choice, and he also helped me decide then out of those three admissions what I should take. I did 2 courses at Oxford online. One was beginners in nonfiction, and one was advanced fiction.
Mm.
And I loved it so much. I loved being immersed in the world of writing. We had a peer group, though it wasn't face to face, but we would give feedback on each other's writing. The tutor would give feedback on our writing. I really enjoyed having all these exercises because it really increased my output of work because I had
Mm.
to write. I'm one person who loves deadlines. So
Mm.
this Friday is my deadline, and I know that somehow my brain will just jangle something together and it'll be ready by Friday afternoon. Friday evening is my deadline because Neelam doesn't look at it till I think 8, 9 at night, but I like to send it by 4 p.m. So I like the idea of having deadlines, and those courses did that for me. And then I thought if I spend 6 months doing this online, I might as well go back physically to university
Yeah.
and do it. It involved a lot of juggling. I was lucky enough to be able to do it. I was financially secure. I was, in a place where even as a family, I had a lot of support. So I pulled my daughter out of school, enrolled her there. I had to defer by a year because she didn't get admission in a school there. And then finally, I landed up there. I was only worried the first few, I guess, days because,
Mm.
you're with a bunch of new people. Most of them are in their 20s. There was one
Yeah.
person who was older than me. She's
Really?
yeah, she was the only
Wow.
60 to 63, I think. And but by the end of a week or so, we formed a group with all of us, including the 60-year-old and two others. We had a very funny group where the youngest one, who's 22, decided that our 76-year professor looked like Dustin Hoffman and she had a crush on him. So we were called Dash the Professors Bitches. Okay, that was our group. I can't really give his name because then that won't be right. And so that was pretty much it. And I had a group, a uni group after I don't know how many years. And even after some time after I left uni, we would send each other our work, and kind of give feedback back and forth. And I really miss that, to be honest. I miss having that group, that peer group, and maybe I'll find another group like that. I thought it was a very, very useful practice.
Hmm. Yeah, that sounds like a great thing to do when you're like grappling with writing problems, right?
Not even not even grappling with writing problems. Sometimes because you know the subject so well, you assume some things, or you're not anchoring, a scene in time and space properly. So the reader is lost. What are the flag posts and things like that? It's useful to have someone else put their eyes on the paper.
Hmm. Okay, great. Right. So, are you working on something else right now, or are you giving yourself a break?
I don't think I believe in this concept of break. For me, a perfect holiday is one where I work in the mornings and then I can just do whatever else. The happiest time for me was when I went on my summer vacation while I had to prepare my dissertation for the master's. So I told my entire family that I'm not going to be available till 11 o'clock. You all go to the buffet breakfast and get me like toast and boiled egg or whatever it is. And after 11, I'm all yours. And I think it was the best holiday I've ever had in my life because I like feeling productive. Just being on
Hmm.
holiday, I feel like I'm a slug. So that's not my concept. I'm always working. I am working on a novel. I'm 25,000 words in. In fact, I said,
God.
yeah, but I've been writing it over a period of time. I was pretty much working on this even before Welcome to Paradise.
Okay.
And in fact, I sent it yesterday to Cheeky finally to have a look. So let's see what she says. And if she rejects it again and again the same thing happens in the world, I'm going to strangle her.
But you should that thing which you did pre-pandemic, revive it now. Why should?
But now it's not, it was at that point it would have been a very
Yeah,
novel idea. Now it's not.
that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. And now everybody is writing about the pandemic. It's become a part of our.
Exactly. Who wants to go back to that place? That was the only time I actually had writer's block, the pandemic. I've never had writer's block otherwise.
It was most stressful time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. Okay, you also write about your grandmother, you
Mhm.
know, and losing her, and even that's like really quite sensitive, you know. So when you're writing about people you've lost, what was the process like? You know?
I think a lot of Welcome to Paradise was also based on things about my grandmother, things she said, her childhood, her life. And she was definitely a very grounding factor in my life, probably the biggest influence. I didn't realize it until she passed away. And then everything I did, there was something connected to her. And that kind of took me aback because very often we don't realize, you know, the actual building blocks of our lives, still they are no longer there.
Hmm.
The other thing about being a writer is, well, when we write from a sensitive, empathetic place, but we're also ruthless in a way where we are grieving, we take notes of our grief. So when my grandmother, who I loved dearly, passed away and I went to her funeral, I came back and I took notes because it was hilarious. They had this little Aga Khan jukebox which somebody had plugged in to play these, Ismaili sort of chants. and then somebody robbed that Aga Khan jukebox. It was
What are you
this guy.
saying?
So I was like, I was amazed by the things that were happening around me in this part where I'm grieving. So I started, I came home and I wrote down all these notes, about the various people who came, what they were talking about, what they were doing, because funerals have a lot of strange, because the emotions are so high that the communication is haywire, literally.
Yeah, very strange energy.
Yeah. And then one lady told me that, I've gone and paid my blessings and, I took one strand of her hair to remember her by. And I was like,
What?
how could you do that? But
You
I
found
couldn't,
it out.
yeah, but I couldn't say that, right? So that these are bizarre things that happen. And I came back and I took notes and I wrote down every single thing that I saw and I felt. And it made its way into, I think, a number of stories, not even one.
Okay, so that's kind of dangerous. I mean, I'm wondering how like people close to you view this because if you're going to be like, or they used to it by now.
They're used to it and they're safe. I'm not doing
Yeah,
anything
yeah.
in a way where, in fact, Ruskin Bond told me that the best way of writing about people is just to live long enough that they all die before you.
It succeeded with him.
It succeeded with him. I hopefully it will succeed with me. I'm trying to outlive everyone so I can write about them. But and then I had another professor at uni who kept writing, memoirs, but then he would keep waiting. I think he wrote about his father, then he wrote about his mother, then he wrote about his sisters, but it was only after they passed away. Because the other thing is, along with it being their story, it's also your story. You just don't write it because of respect for their, privacy and their life. But it's
Yeah,
also your story, right? So
yeah. But
I
that's a
really
bit
write.
ghoulish of him to be.
No, it's not. Like I said, it's his story as well.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay. So I guess these are the things that you have to think about when you're writing about actual people, right?
Yeah. But like I said, Funnybones, most of it is made up. Some of these things
Hmm.
have happened. Some of these things have happened over years. Some of these things have happened to other people. Some of them are exaggerated. My job is to amalgamate all of this into this one essay and sometimes often make it out like it was one day because that's
Hmm.
the way that
Hmm.
the format works.
Yes. Yes. So when what are the writing problems that that you constantly think about, and that you have to unknot, the most irritating ones for you.
In the column, I don't have writing problems. To be honest, I have problems about what to write about. Once I have a clear idea, and that takes me ages, it takes me days of doing research, looking at news, looking at other people, paying attention to what people are saying. That is the most annoying part about the column. It takes me a long time to figure out what to write about. Once I have that, I'm fine. And then I make notes, and then I go with my dog for a walk, and then I put on some
Jivda,
music. Huh?
jivda,
Jibru, Jibru,
jivdu.
yeah, Jibra. And I go with him for a walk. And then at that some point, some of these connections start, taking place. Then I'll come back and I'll start writing. And that's pretty much the process now. With storytelling, novels and short stories, I used to really grapple with the notion of time across stories. And that was very important to me because I like non-linear stories and I wanted to figure out a way of doing them. And now I think by and large, so and when you do non-linear stories, how do you anchor them in time and space, and what are the tricks that you can use? And I did a dissertation on Alice Munro's short stories,
Oh,
and that was one of my main pieces on how she navigates time through her stories. And I learned a lot while just doing research for that piece, and that
oh,
sort of solved it for me.
okay.
But that used to be one of my big issues.
Oh,
Dialogue has never been an issue for me. Dialogue comes, luckily for me, slightly more naturally, it's a bit fluid.
yeah.
So, and I like the editing process. I love that part. I hate the part where I'm sitting and I have to get all these words down. Once they're down, I'm happy. And then I can just cut them and slice them and dice them. And I enjoy that. That's my favorite bit of writing.
This is such a I know, on page 174, marriages are not a public limited company. where you're selling shares and need to give investors their money back. But they still seem to be everybody's businesses instead of just yours. If I paid attention to the comments thrown my way, then either I should get a divorce because my partner and I hold opposing views on multiple issues, or wear a sari and gare to tip tip barsa pani on alternate weekends to keep the marriage alive. So now, this thing, and I've seen it all the time online when people say that, oh, about all sorts of partnerships, right? Right. If you're not on the same wavelength, you don't believe exactly the same thing, dump the person. This is a new thing, right? Every time somebody tweets about something or writes something. So what is your how do you deal with that? Because clearly this comes from that, right?
I think that it would be easier to have someone who has exactly the same ideas and notions as you.
But is
Definitely
that possible?
no. And
Or even desirable?
it's I don't know. Maybe it is desirable. Like I said, life would be much easier if you just agreed and you were clones of each other. There would be no disagreements. But would it be as interesting? Perhaps not. I also am not someone who has a very strong stance of this is the way I believe, and so everyone else should believe the same things that I believe.
Hmm.
Whether everyone in my family is free to, have their own moral stances, their own political stances. And I think that that's the way life should be. In fact, the problem that we're having today is the fact that there is this sort of diktat that people have to behave in a certain way. These are the right things. If
Yeah,
everyone was sort of fluid, we wouldn't be in this position in the first place.
yeah, that's true.
Be tolerant. I'm tolerant of everyone's beliefs, whether they're political, whether they're religious, and I'm happy to live with it. If you are intolerant, you are part of the problem.
Yeah, true. Then this one. I had to multiply 8 hours a day into 365 days into the approximate 35 years left because that's the time I would spend sleeping, and then minus that sum from my timeline, which left me with a mere 24 hours, 24 years of living ahead. I only felt better when I recalled the famous dialogue recited by someone whose eyes crinkled just like mine, Babu Mosha hai, Zindagi badi honi chahiye, lambi nahi. So, I mean, this kind reveal something about the way you think. You're saying that you don't reveal yourself, but you do, right?
What does it say? Chalo, I've revealed myself. Bolo, what have I revealed? That I can count.
That's a bit neurotic. you
How
know,
many writers do you know who are not neurotic?
None. Quite
So
honestly.
who chooses a job where they have to sit at a desk with themselves, bang their head on a paper, live in an imaginary world with imaginary characters? Well adjusted people like being with other people. It's only neurotic people who want to sit and imagine people so that they get along with those people, right?
Hmm.
So then,
But you don't come across somebody who's a who dislike a misanthrope, who dislikes company or anything. You
was
don't
it
come
a
across like that.
misanthrope? Definitely, maybe when I was younger, I was a little more uncomfortable with people. Now
Hmm.
I'm less uncomfortable with people. But am I one of those people who I'm never going to win a popularity contest? I'm never going to have a dozen acquaintances. I'm not even someone who's going to be awake beyond 10:30 p.m. at night. So there goes my social life. This is who I
Hmm.
am, and I'm pretty happy with it.
But who wants to be Miss Popularity? Oh, of course, there are many
There
people
are
who
people
do.
who
Yeah,
want to be popular. There are
that's
people who thrive on the energy of other people.
that's true.
They are called extroverts. No? There's a word for them.
Very true, very true. Yeah, I also enjoyed those little bits about your childhood when your mother said that you broke somebody's teeth, and I
Yeah,
mean, are they really? Is that really true?
that happened. That did happen. That's true.
Wow.
That's true. So
So when you meet these people, see, I mean, from the outside, Bollywood looks like a little village. Okay, everybody knows everybody. So if you're a child and you got into scraps with somebody, and then you grow up and you meet them, there's this history, right? So how
Yeah.
do you like navigate that?
It's fine. It's like anywhere in your building compound. I have friends from, I guess, the family business, as we call it. There are
Hmm.
friends I have, who used to live in the building with me, like everybody else. You have a history with everyone. When you meet them, there's only nostalgia.
Hmm.
There's nothing. I mean, how are you going to hold grudges? And that when you were 10, you push somebody into, I guess,
Yeah.
Pelgam Lake or something. You don't.
Yeah.
So again, there's this very big notion. Yes, everybody knows everybody, but it's like in journalism. You know most other journalists, editors, writers. I
Yeah.
know so many people now because I've been writing for a long. I know so many journalists, so many editors. In the
That's
fashion
true.
business, it's like that. It's like any other business.
I don't know about whether it's like any other business.
Like any other business. What is the difference? It's just that it's out there in the spotlight.
That's true. So therefore, like your the people within that business have a space in people's memories. Now, who the hell cares about journalists, man? You know?
Exactly. I mean, there are certain journalists that people do seem to care about, and they're tearing
Now
them
they do.
down.
Now they do, but tomorrow they won't.
Yeah.
Mm.
No, there is that. I'm not denying the fact that there is this platform. It's again like any other platform, whether it is fame, whether it's technology. There are
Hmm.
pros, there are cons. It's how you use it,
Hmm.
how you use it externally, how you use it internally.
Hmm.
And again, we all have different sides. There's a sort of bookish, nerdy side to me, which will, want to sit in my room and read my science fiction. There is a frivolous side to me that will want to just laugh at silly gossip or talk about, a handbag. I have both sides. I'm both people.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and that anecdote about Amjad Khan's son, that was like really nice.
Shut up. Yeah. I don't know what he's doing anymore, but he was the only person I was scared of.
Okay. Okay, great. So I think that should be it. Now, for the listeners, go out and get Mrs. Funnybones Returns. She's older and wider, but is she wiser? And I was quite surprised that you're like grappling. I mean, like like as we grow
These
older.
ideas that you have, what do you think? Are we an alien species? Where
No,
are we from then?
but one assumes that people, in Bollywood are more confident about some things as they grow older. You know,
Wouldn't they be less confident because they've spent
yeah.
their whole life banking on that? Shouldn't they be less confident rather than more confident that they are losing something that they have always made money off to be honest, their
That
life?
is true.
So
That
then,
is true. Yeah, so maybe I was being very shallow when I was surprised by the weight things and all that you spoke about.
so see, you also have a serious side and a shallow side, both sides, right? Just like all
Yeah,
of us.
true, true. Even I keep jumping on the weighing scales all the time. So yeah, so for the listeners, go out and get Mrs. Funnybones Returns by Twinkle Khanna. It's great fun and also serious in many parts. So it's an enjoyable read.
And
So
this is actually a fun conversation. I had to think about things I haven't thought about in a way that I haven't had to think about them. So that's fun. That's always.
okay, great. Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
You too.